Most people never notice the person who keeps a station alive. They notice admirals, diplomats, and royalty, not the technician inside the maintenance shafts. That was fine with me. My name is Ethan Brooks, senior repair technician aboard Nova Haven, the largest space station in the Galactic Concord. Millions passed through its docks every month, and when something broke, I was usually the one crawling through conduits with a toolbox and a cup of coffee. Machines made sense. A failed relay wasn't lying. A leaking pipe wasn't chasing political power. You found the problem, fixed it, and moved on. Then every corridor light turned gold. Royal Transit. I stepped aside as Princess Lyra Valen passed, surrounded by guards in silver armor. She looked nothing like the triumphant future empress shown on every news broadcast. She looked trapped. For one brief moment, her eyes met mine. Then she disappeared into the crowd. I picked up my toolbox and returned to work, never imagining that a simple maintenance call would soon change the fate of the entire galaxy. The service corridor swallowed the last echoes of the royal procession as I climbed into the maintenance network. Up here, above polished halls and diplomatic chambers, Nova Haven sounded like it always did. A steady chorus of coolant pumps, ventilation fans, and power conduits carrying enough energy to light 100 worlds. To everyone else, it was noise. To me, it was conversation. Every vibration meant something. Every change had a cause. If you listened long enough, the station told you exactly where it hurt. My wrist terminal chimed before I reached the next junction. Priority repair request. Deck 37. Transit Control Conduit B14. I frowned. That conduit had passed inspection 2 days ago. Either the diagnostics had failed, or someone had tampered with it. Neither option made me happy. Brooks, my supervisor, barked over the comm. You got the alert? Already on my way. Royal traffic is moving through that sector. Don, delay. I don't, schedule electrical failures. You attract them. The channel clicked off before I could answer. I laughed quietly and continued crawling through the narrow maintenance shaft until the tunnel opened above the transit conduit. Warm air rushed upward from the massive transport lines below, carrying the scent of ozone and overheated circuitry. I removed the inspection panel and immediately spotted the problem. Someone had bypassed 2 safety relays using cheap commercial wiring. I stared for a moment. Seriously? The repair wasn't difficult, but it made no sense. Every certified engineer on Nova Haven knew shortcuts like this were forbidden. They saved 5 minutes during installation and created disasters months later. Whoever had done it either didn't understand station systems, or wanted them to fail. I cut away the illegal wiring and installed proper relay couplings from my toolkit. As soon as the circuit closed, the conduit settled into its normal rhythm. The irritating vibration disappeared. There you are, I muttered with satisfaction. Before I could replace the access panel, every light around me flickered once. Then twice. Somewhere deep inside the station, something far more serious had just gone wrong. I froze, one hand still resting on the relay housing. Random power fluctuations happened on a station this size, but not like this. Nova Haven had enough redundant systems to survive meteor strikes, reactor failures, even localized sabotage. 2 flickers in less than 3 seconds meant something had confused the central grid itself. My terminal exploded with alerts. Transit control offline. Security lockdown initiated. Priority channel reserved for emergency personnel. Then every message vanished, replaced by a single line. Signal lost. Well, that's new. I sealed the maintenance panel and climbed out of the conduit into the service corridor. The place was eerily quiet. Conveyor belts had stopped moving. Civilian traffic had disappeared. Even the constant background announcements had fallen silent. A heavy blast door slammed shut somewhere nearby. Another answered farther down the corridor. Lockdown. I started jogging toward the nearest maintenance access point. Service crews were expected to report to emergency stations whenever automated systems failed. Halfway there, I heard footsteps echoing through the empty passage. Fast, uneven, Someone was running. I rounded the corner just as a young woman burst through another corridor. Her white ceremonial robes were torn near the sleeve, and strands of dark hair had escaped their careful arrangement. For a split second I didn't recognize her. Then I saw the silver collar around her neck. Princess Lyra. She stopped as abruptly as I did, breathing hard while looking over her shoulder. "They coming," she whispered. Before I could ask who, distant voices echoed through the corridor. "Search every maintenance sector. Seal the exits." The princess looked at me, then at my open maintenance hatch. Without waiting for permission, she stepped toward it. I need somewhere to hide. I should have called security. Instead, I looked once toward the approaching voices, sighed, and held the hatch open. Get in. Everything that followed began with that single decision. For half a second, neither of us moved. The voices were getting closer. Heavy boots struck the deck with military precision, followed by the electronic chirp of portable scanners. Whoever was searching wasn't guessing anymore. They were sweeping the corridors section by section. The princess looked at me with an expression I hadn't expected. Not panic, determination. "I want ask again," she said quietly. "If you intend to turn me in, do it now." I glanced at the maintenance shaft. It wasn't comfortable, but it was hidden behind layers of power conduits and coolant lines. Anyone relying on standard station maps would never think to search inside. Another shout echoed around the corner. "Check every access hatch." "Wonderful timing," I muttered. I climbed inside first, then reached down. "Toolbox." She handed it up. "My turn." She hesitated only long enough to gather her robes before taking my hand. She was lighter than I expected, but surprisingly strong. A moment later she was inside the narrow passage beside me. I lowered the hatch just as armored footsteps thundered past below. We stayed perfectly still. The shaft was barely wide enough for both of us. Cooling fans hummed softly, carrying warm air through the confined space. Somewhere beneath us, scanners emitted rhythmic pulses that vibrated faintly through the metal framework. Neither of us dared breathe too loudly. One of the guards stopped directly underneath. "This hatch? Locked. Scan it." A portable sensor whined for several endless seconds. No life signs. "Move on." The footsteps faded. Only then did I release the breath I'd been holding. "That was closer than I whispered. "So would I?" I looked at her. "You know, most people introduce themselves before hiding in maintenance tunnels." Despite everything, the corner of her mouth lifted. "I am Lyra." "I know. You aren't supposed to." I shrugged. "The entire galaxy has been broadcasting your engagement ceremony for a month." Her smile disappeared. Right, there was something in that single word that sounded painfully tired. Not disappointed, defeated. For the first time, I began to wonder whether the woman sitting beside me was running from kidnappers, or from the life everyone expected her to live. Neither of us spoke for nearly a minute. The maintenance shaft was never designed to hold two people. Pipes lined one wall, thick bundles of fiber conduits the other. The air smelled of warm metal, machine oil, and recycled oxygen. Under normal circumstances I would have found it comforting. These were not normal circumstances. "So," I whispered, "care to explain why the future empress of the Valoran Empire is hiding in my maintenance tunnel?" Lyra lowered her eyes. "If I tell you, you become part of this. I think letting you inside already accomplished that." For the first time since we met, she gave a genuine smile. It was brief, almost reluctant, but it transformed her face completely. "You have a talent for remaining calm." "I repair cooling systems for a living. Panic usually makes things worse." Before she could answer, my wrist terminal vibrated. No signal, no station network, just a local diagnostic warning. Someone had activated emergency overrides throughout this section. Bulkheads were sealing one after another, trapping anyone still inside. I checked the maintenance map stored offline. Every normal exit from our position had just been locked. "That's inconvenient," I muttered. "What is? We officially trapped." She leaned closer to see the display. A strand of dark hair slipped across her face as she studied the map with surprising concentration. "There," she said, pointing to a narrow blue line. I blinked. That's an emergency coolant bypass. It leads beneath the diplomatic quarter. It's also 30 centimeters wide. She looked at me. "Can we fit?" I sighed. "Probably. You don't sound confident." They never crawled through it with a princess before. Another faint smile appeared. "I suppose there is a first time for everything." The station suddenly shook beneath us. Not violently, just enough to send a dull vibration through every support beam. I knew that feeling immediately. A blast door. A very large one. "They resealing entire decks now," I said quietly. "Then we don't have much time." I secured my toolbox to my belt and pulled open the narrow inspection panel leading toward the coolant bypass. "Ladies first." She raised an eyebrow. "I thought humans believed in equality." "We do. Then why me?" "Because if there are spiders in there, I'd rather they meet royalty before maintenance." She stared at me for 2 full seconds. Then, despite everything happening around us, she laughed. Lyra's laughter faded almost as quickly as it appeared. For a heartbeat the frightened princess vanished, replaced by an ordinary young woman who had simply found a ridiculous joke at the worst possible moment. Then reality returned, carried by another distant announcement echoing through the station. "Security teams report to Diplomatic Ring 3. Priority Alpha." "They reorganizing," I whispered. "They re-hunting," Lyra corrected. I led the way into the emergency coolant bypass. Calling it a tunnel was generous. It was a cramped metal tube with barely enough room to crawl, lined with insulated pipes that radiated gentle warmth. My toolbox scraped against the walls every few centimeters, filling the passage with an irritating metallic squeal. "Remind me," Lyra said behind me, "do humans always travel like this?" "Only the glamorous ones." I expected that answer. Learn we very predictable. I somehow doubt that. The tunnel sloped downward before opening into a small maintenance junction. I carefully pushed the access grate aside and peeked into the corridor beyond. Empty. For now. We climbed out one after the other. Lyra brushed dust from her ceremonial robes, then looked around with open curiosity. "You know this station remarkably well." They spent 6 years repairing it. "You remember every corridor? Every important one?" She tilted her head. "And how do you decide which ones are important?" "The ones everyone else ignores." She considered that for a moment before nodding slowly. "That sounds unexpectedly wise." I was aiming for practical. "You achieved both." Before I could answer, my terminal suddenly reconnected to the local network. A flood of alerts filled the screen. Missing person. Princess Lyra Valen. Primary witness. Human technician Ethan Brooks. Detained for questioning immediately. I stared at the message. Then at Lyra. She had already read it over my shoulder. "It begins," she said softly. "No," I replied, locking the terminal and slipping it into my pocket. "It already has." Somewhere beyond the bulkheads, alarms began to rise once more. This time, they were calling my name. For several long seconds, neither of us moved. My name glowed across the terminal as if the station itself had decided I was suddenly the most interesting person in the galaxy. Yesterday I had been another maintenance technician. Today I was the primary witness in the disappearance of an imperial princess. "Well," I said at last, "that's inconvenient." Lyra folded her arms. "You hide your fear behind humor." "I hide everything behind humor." I noticed. Another alert flashed. Security checkpoints expanded. "All maintenance personnel report immediately." "They closing the net," I muttered. "They will search every corridor." "Eventually." She looked at me. "You already have an idea." "I repair stations for a living." "Security knows the public corridors." "I know the ones built before the public corridors." Her expression shifted from curiosity to cautious hope. "There are older passages?" I nodded. "Nova Haven has been expanded 6 times. Every expansion buried part of the original station. Most of those service routes were sealed. but maintenance still has emergency access. And they won, Tino? They, know they exist. I smiled faintly. They just won, Tino. Which doors still open? For the first time since we, met, Lyra looked genuinely impressed. You, planned escape routes? No, they planned repair routes. They happened to work for escaping. A faint tremor rolled through the deck beneath our feet. Somewhere nearby, another blast door sealed with a heavy metallic crash. We should move, she said. I agree. I led her through a narrow hatch concealed behind an inactive environmental control panel. The locking mechanism protested until I struck it twice with the handle of my wrench. The door slid open. Lyra blinked. You fixed it. I persuaded it. By hitting it. They found machines appreciate honesty. She laughed again, quieter this time. It surprised me how quickly the sound eased the tension between us. Behind the hidden doorway stretched a forgotten corridor coated in decades of dust. Emergency lights flickered weakly along the ceiling, revealing faded construction markings from the station's earliest years. No cameras, no patrols, no recent footprints. I looked over my shoulder. Welcome, I said, to the part of Nova Haven everyone forgot existed. The forgotten corridor smelled of dust, warm metal, and stale air. No one had walked through it in years. Thin layers of grime covered the floor, interrupted only by our footprints as we moved deeper into the abandoned section of Nova Haven. The emergency lights were dim enough to leave long shadows across the walls, giving the place the feeling of an ancient ruin instead of part of the busiest station in the galaxy. You really know every corner of this place, Lyra whispered. I know the parts everyone stopped caring about. Why learn corridors that no one uses? Because they, the first places to break. She nodded thoughtfully. I suppose that makes sense. It usually does. We continued in silence until we reached a rusted maintenance junction. The control panel beside it had gone dark years ago, but I ignored it and crouched beside a narrow inspection cover instead. What are you doing? She asked. Looking for an old emergency power line. You remember where it is? I installed the replacement. Her eyebrows rose. 5 years ago. You remember that? I remember everything they repaired. I removed the cover and smiled. There you are. Hidden behind it was a manual override lever. I pulled it firmly. Somewhere ahead, gears groaned before an old blast door slowly rolled open, revealing another corridor beyond. Lyra stared at me. You opened that without power. Mechanical systems are wonderfully stubborn. You sound as though you admire them. I do. Before she could answer, voices echoed faintly behind us. They expanded the search. Check every maintenance level. I quietly closed the inspection panel. They closer than like. She looked toward the distant echoes. They won. Stop. No, neither will I. For the first time since we met, she sounded less like someone running away and more like someone preparing to fight. That worried me. People who suddenly stopped running usually knew something terrible was waiting ahead. I looked at her carefully. Princess, my name is Lyra. Lyra. Whoever is chasing you isn't just trying to find a missing royal, are they? She hesitated. When she finally answered, her voice was barely above a whisper. No, they trying to make sure I never reach my wedding alive. I stared at her, convinced I misheard. You think someone wants to kill you before the ceremony? Lyra didn't answer immediately. She walked to the edge of the abandoned corridor and listened until the distant voices faded again. Only then did she turn back toward me. They don't want my death, she said quietly. They want my disappearance. There's a difference? In Valoran law, yes. I folded my arms. I am going to need more than that. She took a slow breath. If I vanish before the marriage is completed, the succession becomes uncertain. Noble houses begin competing for influence. Military commanders choose sides. Ancient treaties collapse. And the alliance? It dies with it. The realization settled over me like cold water. This isn't about one wedding. No, it's about preventing a war. She nodded. For 3 centuries my family has held the empire together. My marriage was supposed to secure another century of peace. And someone wants the opposite. Yes, I rubbed the back of my neck. I fix coolant systems. This is far above my pay grade. A faint smile crossed her face. They said that twice. Because it's still true. Before either of us could speak again, my terminal vibrated. No network, just an encrypted emergency packet. Human priority channel. I frowned. Maintenance technicians didn't receive encrypted government messages. I opened it anyway. Ethan Brooks, stay where you are if possible. Do not surrender the princess. Human representatives are intervening. More instructions will follow. There was no signature, only a security code proving it originated from Earth's diplomatic mission. Lyra had read the message before I could lower the screen. They believe me. I think they believe both of us. She looked genuinely surprised. Your government trusts a repair technician with an imperial crisis? I slipped the terminal back into my pocket. My government probably trusts the evidence. A metallic clang echoed through the forgotten corridor. Not behind us. Ahead. Someone else was already inside the abandoned passages. And judging by the slow, deliberate footsteps, they had been waiting. I raised a hand, silently telling Lyra to stay behind me. It wasn't much of a plan. I wasn't a soldier, and the only thing in my hands was a well-used maintenance wrench. Still, it felt better than standing there waiting for whoever was approaching. The footsteps stopped. No voices, no scanners, just silence. Whoever it was knew enough not to announce their presence. I slowly reached into my toolbox and removed a small inspection mirror attached to a flexible rod. Lyra watched with obvious confusion. Using a mirror? I'd rather not introduce my face before I know who's waiting. Carefully, I extended the mirror around the corner. The corridor beyond was empty. Then a shadow moved across the reflection. I pulled the mirror back just as something metallic struck the wall where it had been. Sparks scattered across the floor. Definitely not maintenance, I muttered. A calm voice echoed from the darkness. Human. I felt Lyra tense behind me. We know the princess is with you. The accent wasn't Valoran. It wasn't human either. It was impossible to place. If you here to help, I called back. Your introduction could use some work. A short laugh answered me. We are not here to help. Figured. The unseen speaker continued. Surrender Princess Lyra, and you may leave alive. I looked over my shoulder. She wasn't frightened anymore. She was angry. They serve him, she whispered. Him? She hesitated. Admiral Darius Kane. The name meant nothing to me, but the bitterness in her voice said enough. I turned back toward the corridor. Sorry, I replied loudly. She doesn't seem interested. A flash of blue light erupted from around the corner. I ducked instinctively as an energy bolt slammed into an overhead conduit. Steam burst into the corridor, filling the air with a cloud of white vapor. For once, a broken pipe worked in my favor. I grabbed Lyra's wrist. Run! We disappeared into the maze of forgotten passages just as more bolts tore through the steam, each one missing us by only a few meters. Someone wanted the princess captured. Someone else was willing to kill anyone standing beside her. Unfortunately for them, I knew this station far better than they ever would. The steam concealed us for only a few seconds, but a few seconds were enough. I pulled Lyra through a narrow service hatch and sealed it behind us before the pursuit reached the intersection. The bolts striking the bulkhead outside became dull, distant thuds. They search every branch, she whispered. They search the obvious ones. And this isn't obvious? I shook my head. This passage was abandoned after the third expansion. Officially, it doesn't exist anymore. She glanced at the rusted walls. I believe it. We moved carefully, our footsteps softened by decades of dust. The corridor curved around a dormant reactor manifold before ending at an old freight lift with its doors half open. The control panel was dead, but the mechanical release remained intact. Can you make it work? Lyra asked. I don't T need power. I inserted my wrench into the release slot and leaned with all my weight. Rust groaned. A loud crack echoed through the shaft before the doors reluctantly slid apart. Beyond them stretched a vertical maintenance ladder disappearing into darkness. Ladies first. She gave me an amused look. Even while escaping assassins? Especially then. She started climbing without another word. I followed a few meters behind, listening for pursuit. Halfway up, unfamiliar voices drifted through the shaft below. They came this way. Find the human. Leave the princess alive. I froze. Lyra looked down. They separating us. So it sounds. If they catch you, they won. T. You sound remarkably certain. I am remarkably stubborn. A faint smile crossed her face before she continued climbing. When we finally reached the top, I forced open another hatch. Cool air rushed in, carrying the distant hum of station life. We emerged inside an abandoned observation deck overlooking Nova Haven's central docking ring. Hundreds of ships drifted beyond the transparent alloy. Trade continued. Passengers hurried between terminals. No one below realized that somewhere above them, the future of an empire was running through forgotten corridors with a maintenance technician who was beginning to suspect this crisis had started long before either of them had met. I stepped toward the observation glass and looked down at the docking ring. Cargo tugs drifted between freighters, passengers crossed illuminated walkways, and merchants argued over schedules exactly as they had every day before this disaster began. From up here the station looked peaceful. That, I realized, was the frightening part. Most people never noticed history while it was happening beneath their feet. Lyra joined me at the window. They done, Tino. No, they, reliving normal lives. For a little longer, she remained silent, watching a transport detach from its berth. I used to envy that, she admitted. Ordinary people, the freedom to disappear into a crowd. They never had that. She smiled sadly. When I was 6, I waved from a palace balcony. Thousands remembered it. They never been anonymous. Before I could answer, movement caught my eye. Across the docking ring, 3 figures emerged onto an elevated security bridge. They weren't searching randomly. Their helmets turned together, sweeping the station with disciplined precision. I crouched instinctively. Down. Lyra dropped beside me without hesitation. What is it? They, professionals. You can tell from here? They watched security long enough. I pointed toward the bridge. Station officers don't move like that. She carefully looked over the edge. I recognized the armor. Whose is it? The Imperial Internal Directorate. The people protecting you? The people who report directly to Admiral Kane. That answered more questions than I wanted answered. So the search isn't official. No, it's been stolen. She looked at me, her expression unexpectedly calm. Exactly. My terminal vibrated once. Another encrypted message. Proceed to Dock 17. Trust no Imperial authority. Human extraction team arriving. Maintain radio silence. No signature. No explanation. Just coordinates. I memorized them before deleting the transmission. Lyra noticed. Good news? I honestly can tell. She nodded once. Then we keep moving. I adjusted my grip on the toolbox. For the first time, we weren't simply running from danger. We were running toward someone. I only hoped whoever was waiting at Dock 17 had reached it before Admiral Kane's people did. We left the observation deck through a maintenance door hidden behind a warped display panel. Once it closed behind us, the noise of the docking ring vanished, replaced by the familiar hum of ventilation fans and aging conduits. The station felt different here, stripped of polished corridors and ceremonial banners. Steele did not care about politics. How far? Lyra asked. Dock 17? She nodded. About 15 minutes if nothing goes wrong. And if something does? I glanced at her. Then we'll find another route. You always sound so certain. They repaired enough disasters to know panicking never fixes them. She considered that without replying. We descended another service ladder before entering a narrow transit conduit that paralleled the main transport lines. Freight drones occasionally passed behind reinforced mesh, unaware that two fugitives were pacing them only meters away. My terminal remained silent. That worried me more than another message would have. If your people are coming, Lyra said quietly. Why Haven, they contacted you again. They told me to maintain radio silence. Do humans normally obey orders that easily? I smiled faintly. No, but we usually obey the sensible ones. She almost laughed. Almost. A vibration rolled through the deck beneath our boots. Not an explosion. Engines. Large ones. I stopped walking. What is it? She whispered. Ships. You can tell? I know this station. The vibration came again. Longer this time. Multiple arrivals, I said. Heavy displacement. Lyra's expression tightened. My fiancé wasn't due until tomorrow. You think it's connected? I think someone has changed the schedule. Before I could answer, every light inside the conduit dimmed. A calm female voice echoed across Nova Haven. Attention! By authority of Imperial Security Command, all civilian traffic is suspended. Docking operations are restricted until further notice. Lyra slowly closed her eyes. They locked down the entire station. I looked toward the unseen direction of Dock 17. No, I said quietly. They locked it down for us. I checked the time out of habit, though it no longer mattered. Schedules meant nothing once an entire station entered emergency lockdown. Every route could change within seconds, every safe corridor become a trap. Lyra watched me studying the maintenance map stored inside my terminal. Can we still reach Dock 17? Yes, you don't sound convinced. Because the shortest route is gone. She nodded. So we take the longer one. There ISN, T1. For the first time since we met, uncertainty settled between us. Then I zoomed the map out. Old construction layers appeared beneath the modern station layout, faded lines that maintenance archives never deleted. Most technicians ignored them because they described sections that no longer officially existed. Most technicians. I think I found something, I said. A tunnel? An unfinished supply conduit. It was abandoned before the fourth expansion. Will it be open? I shrugged. We about to find out. We reached a sealed bulkhead marked with paint so faded that the warning symbols were barely visible. The manual locking wheel resisted at first before slowly turning beneath both our hands. Metal groaned through the empty passage. The door opened barely wide enough for us to slip inside. Cold air drifted out. No footprints. No lights. Only darkness. I switched on my inspection lamp. The narrow beam revealed stacks of forgotten construction materials exactly where workers had left them years earlier. This place is untouched, Lyra whispered. That's what we need. We moved carefully through the silent conduit until another vibration rolled beneath our feet. Much stronger this time. The entire passage trembled. I looked upward. Those Aaron transports. What are they? I listened for another second. Then my stomach tightened. Warships. Her face turned pale. They arrived early. Before either of us could speak again, every light on my terminal illuminated at once. One message. One sentence. Human delegation has been denied permission to dock. Proceed alone.